We've got some very interesting news to take a look at here today involving one of the New York Rangers players who will now be missing quite a bit of time due to an injury, which will definitely be a big loss for this team, as well as we'll take a look at some trade news that has come up as well involving a certain player on the New York Rangers that could be traded away at some point before the deadline or possibly at some point this upcoming offseason to a certain team, which we have a couple destinations that could possibly be interested in this certain player. So we'll take a look at these two pieces of news in today's video. And now for the injury news here, we have Adam Edstrom, who will be missing the next 6 to 10 weeks with a lower body injury, which is just very unfortunate. I mean, this has been someone who I would say has been a pretty key player for this New York Rangers fourth line. Now, has he had the greatest overall impact on this team? No, but has he had a really good kind of key role on that fourth line for this Rangers team, playing a physical role, scoring here and there as well, providing some decent offense, playing up for the most part a decent kind of two-way game, and is still a very young player as well. Is getting some time at the NHL level, continuing to develop and get better. So I think what he's done so far this season on that fourth line has been pretty good, and kind of what he's brought has been exactly for the most part what you want to see out of a fourth line player. And with the fact that he is still so young, he is still developing, and he is a pretty versatile player as well, because he has the ability to play, left wing, right wing, and center, has that versatility, which is always nice as well. So I think personally he's going to be a very important piece of this New York Rangers bottom six for years to come. I do think he has the potential to be a pretty solid, maybe kind of third line guy, but that's at best there. I mean, that's the very most. He's not going to be a top six forward in my opinion, but maybe he can kind of develop into a third line guy as well. But for right now, definitely having him on that fourth line kind of fits him well, I think. And he does have that bit of physical game to him, obviously. Not maybe quite as much as a guy like Matt Rempe, but obviously, he brings some of that physical force out there, definitely has a bit of feistiness to him, obviously has that massive size and doesn't use it as much as a guy like Rempe, but he still uses it quite a bit there, has some toughness to his game, which is nice and which is something this team definitely needed to add more of, so adding him in is quite nice, but losing him for the next 6 to 10 weeks is going to be a big loss for this team. And some people could think because he's a fourth liner that he doesn't have much of an impact on this team, but I think he does, especially in that fourth line role. I think he's done a pretty good job, but when you consider losing a guy like that, it obviously hurts the depth quite a bit. So now you have a guy like Jimmy Vesey, who at one point I thought could possibly be a piece that the Rangers look to trade away for a mid to kind of later round pick or an okay prospect, to get something back in return for someone who could possibly end up walking away for nothing this upcoming offseason. And now, at this point, with this injury news, I don't see how there's a real chance of them even kind of talking about it or really kind of shopping him around at all at this point. Now, maybe they still do, and I'm wrong, and that's definitely a possibility. But at this point here, with this injury to Adam Edstrom, the New York Rangers really do kind of need to have a guy like Jimmy Vesey around. So I think, you could have a fourth line going forward of kind of the mix of players like, a Vesey, Rempe, Brodzinski, and Carrick if you're able to get that third line center. And that is my next point here as well, talking about the Adam Edstrom injury and kind of what other factors could kind of happen here. And with the Rangers losing a bit of depth now on that fourth line, I think if, you go out there and you can make that trade for a third line center, which even before this trade happened, I think it was a need. But now I think there's even maybe a little bit more of a need to go out there and make that trade for a third-line center. It doesn't have to be some elite third-line center. Some guy's going to cost you a second-round pick and a really great prospect or a first-round pick or something crazy like that. You don't have to go out there and spend a ton of assets on a third-line center. You can go out there and just get a decent, solid one, maybe a veteran guy or a somewhat kind of young guy with a bit of team control on him, maybe a bit of term left under contract. That wouldn't be bad at all either. And obviously we'll have to kind of wait and see which kind of third-line type centers become available, but I just think that if you can add in that third line center there and push down a guy like Johnny Brodzinski, especially after this injury, down to that fourth line, you can have four players kind of running through that fourth line there and having some extra depth there and having, one of these guys be the extra forward in Jimmy Vesey, Rempe, Brodzinski, and Carrick. That can be your fourth line where you're running those two guys through. Obviously, you have Carrick as that center, and then the wingers are Vesey, Rempe, and Brodzinski. Those two guys can kind of come in and out of the lineup however you want, but that can obviously happen if you do add in that third line center. So that's kind of why I think it is a very important thing now, especially to go out there and get that third line center before this injury happened. I thought it was important, but now I think it definitely is more important because this team could use a little bit more depth unless they really start wanting to call up some of their young guys as well. But The kind of main problem with that is the Rangers don't necessarily have a kind of center prospect down in Hartford who is going to be quite ready to really make that big impact at the NHL level, like a prospect like maybe even a Othman or a Braga do. And I'm not saying they would come in here and have a huge impact, but we don't even have a level of prospect like that who is pretty much NHL ready. I mean, Noah Laba, Bryce McConnell-Barker, Dylan Rubrecht. There are some talented prospects out there that are centers in this system, but most of these guys maybe aren't quite ready to kind of make that jump. And obviously, like Noah Laba is still playing, university hockey as well. So it's not like he was even ready to come over anyways. So I think overall, adding in a third line center would be huge for this team, and it definitely should be at the top of that priority list for this New York Rangers team. And now we've got some trade news to take a look at here involving K'Andre Miller. And we have an article to kind of take a look at as they end up saying, quote, Miller is reportedly starting to generate interest too. According to the fourth period, the Vancouver Canucks, Anaheim Ducks, and San Jose Sharks are all linked to the 6'5" blue liner. The Canucks and Rangers recently linked up on a big trade centering around star forward JT Miller. However, there is no question that the Canucks blue line could use a boost even after acquiring Marcus Pettersson from the Pittsburgh Penguins. Miller could be a strong addition to their blue line if acquired. They also say about the Ducks, the left side of the Ducks blue line could use some work and Miller could fit in nicely on their roster because of it. If acquired, he would be a clear fit for their top four and could work on both their power play and their penalty kill. As for the Sharks, they are also in a position to improve their defensive group while the club is rebuilding. Miller could be a match there as he is. And I think it makes sense for both the Ducks and Sharks to go after someone like K'Andre Miller. Right now, if we're being honest, he is nowhere near his peak value. I think that's pretty clear. He's not playing the best hockey of his career. And when you consider how little he may end up costing compared to really what his potential still could possibly end up being, maybe there is a team out there that is willing to take that fairly decent sized risk, although it's not the biggest one because I don't think you have to give up an insane amount of stuff for K'Andre, but it's still going to be a decent chunk of value for someone like K'Andre. It's not going to be for nothing. It's not going to be a third round pick and a bad prospect. It's just not going to be that because at that point, you might as well hold on to him if you're the Rangers, right? So I don't think his value is very high, but I also don't think it's super, super low where you're not going to be able to get anything of value for him. So I do think it makes sense to kind of shop him around and look for a possible trade to kind of move off him before maybe if he does come around back next season with the Rangers. If he has another bad season, that's probably where his value completely drops off a cliff, and it's pretty much you're trading him for almost nothing after that. But maybe if you trade him at this deadline or in this upcoming offseason, maybe he does have a decent chunk of value left where, and with him being an RFA this upcoming offseason, maybe a team is willing to go out there and offer you a decent pick or two and a decent prospect or two, or a solid kind of young NHLer or about NHL caliber player who's fairly young or something like that, just a decent kind of asset or two, something of value. Maybe a team is willing to give that up for someone like K'Andre Miller, who definitely has some potential left. And when you are a team like the Ducks and Sharks, where you have a ton of assets for the future with picks and prospects and all that kind of stuff, it isn't the worst idea to go out there and trade some of those assets away for a player who can kind of help you right now, but also potentially in the future. And when you consider the upside that someone like K'Andre does have, it definitely makes a lot of sense for a team who has an abundance of assets for the future, being picks and prospects, to use some of that and go out there after someone like a K'Andre Miller, who definitely is a risk, but those are the teams who I think can kind of take that risk and kind of need to with where they're at right now, because the Ducks and Sharks have been in a rebuild for a while now. They're obviously slowly starting to try and come out of it. And a guy like K'Andre, if he can go over to a team and really start to kind of turn things back around and get back on track to where he was at one point with the Rangers, I definitely think he could be a bit of a steal in a trade for a team. And a team like the Ducks, like I said, and Sharks definitely make a ton of sense. Now, for the Canucks there, obviously they just traded for Marcus Pettersson. They just made that trade with the Rangers for JT Miller. So I'm not 100% sure that we're going to see another trade here between the Rangers and Canucks, but I very well could end up being wrong. Maybe they do look to add in another defenseman before this, the end of the trade deadline here. That's a possibility, but in my opinion, it is a lot more likely that we would see him traded away to a team like the Ducks or Sharks before this deadline, although I definitely could be wrong and he could get traded away somewhere else, or maybe he doesn't get traded away at all. And I definitely am not saying that I think he is going to get traded away, but these three destinations that did come up in this article, I definitely think do, at least two of them, make quite a bit of sense, especially the Ducks and Sharks. Anyways, Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you have enjoyed, definitely hit that like and subscribe button for daily New York Rangers content. I do post every single day, so if you are a Rangers fan, you want to see daily kind of videos on updates, news, just kind of talking about the Rangers in general every single day, definitely hit that like and subscribe button. It helps out the channel a ton. I would really appreciate it. And also definitely comment down below your thoughts on the overall possible trade of K'Andre Miller and kind of what are your thoughts on that possibly happening, as well as the pretty big Adam Edstrom kind of injury news that definitely will have a major impact on this New York Rangers fourth line. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next one. Bye.